A black soldier walks into a quiet southern bar, seeking nothing but peace. But when a gang of hostile bikers fixate on him, what starts as taunts quickly spirals toward a dangerous confrontation. Their leader questions his service, pushing him to react. But Roman isn't just any man. He's trained for battle, both on and off the field. Will he defuse the tension, or is Winston's taproom about to witness an unforgettable reckoning? If you were in Roman's shoes, how would you have handled this confrontation? Where are you watching this from? Drop your city and country in the comments. Love gripping stories of strength, courage, and real-life battles? Hit that subscribe button and join a community that values powerful storytelling. Roman, a black soldier recently returned from deployment, walked into Winston's taproom, a quiet bar nestled in the heart of North Carolina. The door swung shut behind him, cutting off the sounds of the outside world and replacing it with the low hum of country music. The dim lights cast a soft golden glow over the wooden interiors, creating a warm and somewhat nostalgic atmosphere. The bar was a quintessential Southern establishment, frequented by locals who sought solace in its familiar embrace. The scent of aged wood and faint traces of tobacco lingered in the air. Patrons, mostly truckers with stories etched into their weathered faces, sat at scattered tables, engrossed in conversations about the day's haul and the miles they had left to travel. The bartender, a grizzled man with a kind but tired expression, methodically cleaned glasses, his movements practiced and precise. As Roman made his way inside, he was acutely aware of the glances that followed him. It wasn't the first time he had experienced this. Being one of the few black soldiers in his unit had made him accustomed to the stares. But tonight, after months of deployment, he just needed a place to unwind, to let the weight of the world slip off his shoulders for a while. He had seen and experienced more than he cared to recount, and the longing for a simple drink in a quiet corner was overwhelming. He approached the bar, his boots thudding softly against the wooden floor. The bartender looked up, a hint of recognition in his eyes. "What can I get you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Just a beer, please," Roman replied, offering a polite nod. The bartender nodded back and reached for a cold bottle, popping the cap off with a practiced flick of his wrist before sliding it across the counter. Roman took the beer with a quiet thanks and moved to a corner table, away from the prying eyes. He settled into the chair, the wood creaking slightly under his weight. Taking a long sip of the cold, crisp beer, he felt a semblance of calm begin to wash over him. The country music with its twangy guitars and soulful lyrics served as a backdrop to his thoughts, providing a sense of normalcy that he had been craving. He observed the bar's patrons from his corner, noting the camaraderie and easy banter that flowed between them. It was a scene he had missed during his time away, a slice of life that seemed both foreign and achingly familiar. He kept to himself, content to be an observer rather than a participant. The stares didn't bother him. He had learned long ago to ignore them. What mattered was the moment of peace he had found in this small, unassuming bar. As he nursed his beer, Roman exhaled, letting the tension fade. For now, the world outside could wait. This bar was his brief escape from the chaos beyond. The door of Winston's taproom creaked open, letting in a group of 6 young white bikers. They were laughing and loud, their presence immediately disrupting the calm of the bar. The regular patrons, mostly truckers, glanced at the newcomers, their conversations pausing for a moment. Leading the group was a man in his late 30s. His cocky attitude was evident in the way he carried himself. His arms were covered in tattoos, telling tales of a rough past. He wore a leather jacket with veteran patches, marking him as someone who had served. His eyes scanned the room with a sense of ownership, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Roman sat in a quiet corner of the bar, sipping his beer. The bar had provided him a moment of peace, a brief escape from the weight of his experiences, but he was used to stares and whispers, especially in places like this. He chose this corner specifically to avoid any trouble. The bikers noticed Roman almost immediately. The leader nudged his friends and pointed in Roman's direction. They exchanged smirks, their laughter growing louder. The leader's eyes glinted with a challenge, and he decided to make his move. Didn't think just anyone could wear that uniform these days, he remarked loudly, ensuring Roman could hear every word. His voice was filled with mockery, intending to provoke a reaction. His friends chuckled, their laughter echoing through the bar. Roman's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. He had faced men like these before, bullies who thrived on intimidation. He had learned to pick his battles carefully. Reacting to their taunts would only escalate the situation. So, he chose to ignore the comment, focusing on his beer and the country music playing softly in the background. Despite Roman's calm demeanor, the tension in the bar was thick. The regular patrons sensed the growing hostility, casting worried glances toward Roman and the bikers. The bartender, who had been cleaning glasses with practiced ease, paused, his eyes darting between Roman and the newcomers. The leader of the bikers, unsatisfied with Roman's lack of response, took a step closer. His smirk deepened into a sneer. The air grew heavier with the unspoken challenge, and the dim lights of the bar cast long shadows that seemed to mirror the unease. Minutes passed, and the standoff between Roman and the bikers teetered on the edge of eruption. Roman remained steadfast, his calm a stark contrast to the escalating tension. In that moment, the peaceful ambiance of Winston's taproom gave way to a brewing storm. The first signs of trouble were clear, and everyone in the bar felt the impending clash. The leader of the bikers, with his tattooed arms and cocky demeanor, sauntered over to Roman's table. He tried to act casual, but his tone was dripping with condescension. He took a swig of his beer and leaned against the table, looking down at Roman. "So, you're a soldier, huh?" the leader sneered. "Where'd you serve? Or did you just buy that uniform at a costume shop?" Roman looked up calmly, meeting the leader's gaze. He knew this type of confrontation well, and wasn't about to let this man get under his skin. "Yes, I served. I've been deployed overseas," Roman replied evenly. The leader wasn't satisfied with the answer. He glanced at Roman's sneakers and smirked. "Real soldiers don't wear sneakers like that. Nice try, though. You must think we're idiots." Roman took another sip of his beer, maintaining his composure. He knew reacting angrily would only escalate the situation. "I wear what's comfortable when I'm not on duty," he said, keeping his voice steady. The leader's smirk grew wider. He leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "Prove it. Show me some kind of proof. Or are you just another wannabe pretending to be something you're not?" The other bikers gathered around, laughing and egging on their leader. But not all of them were enjoying the show. One or two of them looked uneasy, glancing around the bar as if they wished they were somewhere else. Roman knew he had to handle this carefully. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his military ID, holding it up for the leader to see. "This is my proof. I've served my country, and I don't need to prove myself to you." For a moment, the leader was silent, taken aback. The mocking laughter of the bikers died down, and an uneasy silence filled the bar. The leader snatched the ID from Roman's hand, examining it closely. He handed it back grudgingly, his sneer fading. "Well, look at that. Seems you're the real deal after all," the leader muttered, unable to hide the hint of respect in his voice. Roman took back his ID and put it away. "I don't need your approval," he said calmly. "I'm here to enjoy my drink, just like everyone else. Let's leave it at that." The leader nodded slowly, backing off. The tension in the bar began to ease, the uneasy atmosphere lifting as the bikers retreated to their corner. Roman returned to his beer, hoping that the confrontation was over and he could finally have some peace. The rest of the bar's patrons, who had been watching the exchange with bated breath, began to relax. Conversations resumed, and the country music that had been playing softly in the background once again filled the room. One of the bikers, who had been uneasy during the confrontation, approached Roman quietly. "Sorry about that, man." "Not all of us are like him," he said, offering a nod of respect before returning to his group. Roman appreciated the gesture but didn't respond. He had faced worse situations before, and this was just another test of his patience and resolve. He took a deep breath, letting the calm of the bar wash over him once more. In the dimly lit corners of Winston's taproom, peace had returned, and Roman hoped it would stay that way. The leader of the bikers, feeling embarrassed and angry after being called out, wasn't ready to back down. He decided to push things further, hoping to provoke Roman into a reaction. With a sneer on his face, he reached out aggressively and grabbed Roman by the collar, yanking him forward. Roman's military training kicked in instinctively. He remained calm and quickly assessed the situation. Using precise movements, he twisted the leader's arm, forcing him to let go. In one swift motion, Roman slammed the leader onto the table, pinning him down. The noise echoed through the bar, and everyone fell silent. The other bikers froze in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had never seen their leader overpowered so easily. The leader, now grimacing in pain, tried to muster some semblance of dignity, but found himself at Roman's mercy. Roman looked around the bar, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I don't start fights, but I finish them," he said, his voice calm but firm. The message was clear. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he wouldn't back down from defending himself either. For a moment, it seemed as if the situation might de-escalate. The other bikers hesitated, unsure of what to do next. They exchanged uncertain glances, their initial bravado replaced by caution. However, one of the bikers, looking to turn the situation in their favor, quickly pulled out his phone and called the police. "Officer, we need help! A guy in here just assaulted our friend!" he shouted, exaggerating the events to make Roman look like the aggressor. Roman released his hold on the leader and stepped back, his hands raised slightly to show he meant no further harm. He knew the false accusation could complicate matters, but he also knew he had acted in self-defense. As the bikers regrouped, muttering among themselves, the tension in the bar remained palpable. The regular patrons who had been watching the scene unfold whispered nervously. They had seen the initial confrontation and knew Roman had been provoked, but they also knew how things could be twisted against him. The bartender, who had observed everything from behind the counter, decided to step in. He put down the glass he had been cleaning and walked over to the bikers. "Listen up," he said, his voice authoritative. "We all saw what happened here. Your friend started it, and this man defended himself. If the police come, they'll hear the truth from us." The leader, still nursing his sore arm, glared at the bartender but knew he had lost the upper hand. The other bikers, realizing the situation was no longer in their favor, began to back down. The tension slowly started to dissipate, though the air remained charged with unease. Roman, still standing ready, nodded appreciatively to the bartender. He then turned to the leader. "We can end this here," he said. "No more trouble. Let's just go our separate ways." The leader, though clearly seething, gave a reluctant nod. He signaled his crew to follow him, and they slowly made their way out of the bar, their pride bruised but their immediate conflict averted. As they left, the bar slowly returned to its usual atmosphere. The patrons resumed their conversations, though with an added layer of caution and respect for Roman. The bartender gave Roman a nod of acknowledgement, and Roman returned to his seat, hoping to finally enjoy his drink in peace. The storm had passed, but the memory of the confrontation lingered in the air, a reminder of the delicate balance between peace and conflict. The tense atmosphere in Winston's taproom was interrupted by the arrival of the police. The flashing lights of the squad car reflected off the bar's windows as two officers stepped inside, their expressions serious. The lead officer, a white man in his mid-40 seconds, scanned the room, his eyes landing on Roman. The bartender quickly stepped forward, waving his hands to get the officer's attention. "Officers, this man," he pointed to Roman, "acted in self-defense. The bikers started the trouble. We all saw it." Several truckers nodded in agreement, their voices rising in support. "He didn't do anything wrong," one of them said. "He was just defending himself when they attacked him." Despite the testimony of the bartender and truckers, the lead officer eyed Roman with suspicion. "Is that so?" he said, his tone cold. He walked over to Roman, his gaze scrutinizing. "Mind showing me some proof of your service?" the officer demanded, his voice carrying an edge of doubt. It was clear he was treating Roman differently than he would a white soldier. The implications stung, but Roman knew he needed to keep his cool. Maintaining his composure, Roman reached into his pocket and pulled out his military ID. He handed it to the officer, who examined it closely, his expression unchanged. The officer took his time, verifying the details on the ID. The room was silent, everyone watching the interaction with bated breath. Roman stood tall, his face calm but resolute. After what felt like an eternity, the officer's expression softened. He handed the ID back to Roman and nodded. "It checks out. You're telling the truth," he admitted, albeit grudgingly. The other officer, who had been observing quietly, nodded in agreement. "Looks like it was a case of self-defense," he said. "We'll need to take statements from everyone here, but it seems clear what happened." Relief washed over the room as the patrons relaxed, the tension slowly dissipating. The bartender and the truckers exchanged satisfied glances, glad to see justice being served. The lead officer, acknowledging the collective support for Roman, turned to the bikers who were lingering by the door. "You fellas need to leave," he ordered. "We don't want any more trouble here." The bikers, realizing they were outnumbered and outmatched, reluctantly complied. They muttered under their breath as they filed out of the bar, their bravado deflated. Roman took a deep breath, grateful for the bartender and the truckers who had stood up for him. He nodded his thanks to them, and they responded with reassuring smiles. As the police wrapped up their paperwork and prepared to leave, the lead officer gave Roman one last look. "Next time, try to avoid trouble," he said, though his tone was softer than before. Roman nodded, understanding the officer's position but knowing he had done nothing wrong. He watched as the officers exited the bar, leaving a sense of calm in their wake. The night's events had been intense, but peace had been restored. Roman returned to his seat, hoping that the rest of his evening would be uneventful. The patrons resumed their conversations, the country music playing softly in the background, and Winston's taproom slowly returned to its usual atmosphere. As the police wrapped up their investigation, the lead officer turned to the bikers, his expression stern. "You need to be careful about filing false reports," he warned. We've spoken to multiple witnesses, and it's clear that this man," he pointed to Roman, "was acting in self-defense. If you continue to push this, you'll find yourselves in serious trouble." The leader of the bikers, his face red with humiliation and anger, clenched his fists. He knew there was no way to twist the story in his favor now. With a final glare at Roman, he motioned to his crew. "Let's get out of here," he muttered, his voice low and filled with frustration. The bikers, their confidence shattered, followed their leader out of Winston's taproom. The heavy doors swung shut behind them, and the tension in the bar began to ease. Conversations slowly resumed, though the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Some of the patrons who had witnessed the confrontation now looked at Roman with a newfound respect. They had seen his composure and strength in the face of provocation, and their attitudes softened. They offered nods of acknowledgement and even a few quiet words of support. However, not everyone felt the same. Some remained indifferent, preferring to stay out of the conflict entirely. Roman, still seated at his corner table, took a deep breath. He had hoped for a quiet evening, but the events of the night had unfolded differently. He was grateful for the support he had received, but he also knew he couldn't let his guard down completely. The bartender, who had been a silent observer throughout the ordeal, approached Roman with a drink in hand. "Here," he said, placing the glass on the table. "On the house. I'm sorry for the trouble tonight." Roman nodded, appreciating the gesture. "Thank you," he said simply, taking the drink. The bartender's unspoken apology was clear, a recognition of the unfairness Roman had faced and a small attempt to make amends. As Roman sipped his drink, the bar slowly returned to its usual atmosphere. The country music played softly in the background, and the conversations of the patrons created a comforting hum. Roman allowed himself to relax, hoping that the rest of the evening would pass without further incident. The memory of the confrontation lingered, but Roman remained resolute. He had faced down trouble before, and he knew he would face it again. But for now, in the dimly lit warmth of Winston's taproom, he found a moment of peace. The respect of some and the indifference of others didn't matter as much as the quiet strength he carried within himself. As the night wore on, Roman continued to enjoy his drink, the events of the evening slowly fading into the background. He knew that life would always present challenges, but he also knew that he had the resilience to face them head on. And in that quiet corner of the bar, he found a brief respite from the world outside. A few days after the incident at Winston's taproom, Roman heard a knock at his door. Opening it, he found Bryce, one of the bikers from that night, standing on his porch. Bryce looked nervous and unsure, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Roman, right?" Bryce began, his voice hesitant. "I'm Bryce. We met the other night at the bar. I wanted to talk to you." Roman crossed his arms, his face impassive. "What do you want, Bryce?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. Bryce took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Look, I know we were wrong. What happened at the bar, it shouldn't have gone down that way. I regret going along with the group. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I realize now how out of line we were." Roman listened, his expression unreadable. He had heard apologies before, but they often rang hollow. However, he gave Bryce the chance to speak, wanting to hear him out. Bryce continued, his voice more earnest now. "The way you handled yourself, your strength and composure, it made me rethink my actions. I'm genuinely sorry for what happened. We were way out of line, and I wanted to apologize to you in person." Roman remained skeptical but appreciated the effort Bryce was making. "It takes guts to come here and admit you were wrong," he said slowly. "I acknowledge your apology. But understand, one apology doesn't fix everything." Bryce nodded, relief washing over his face. "I get that. I just wanted to make things right, as best as I could. Thank you for listening."
As Bryce turned to leave, Roman watched him go, a mix of emotions swirling within him.
This unexpected visit had given him a lot to think about. Closing the door, Roman sat down, reflecting on the everyday battles he faced, not just on the battlefield, but at home as well. The confrontation at the bar was just one example of the challenges he encountered. Prejudice and misunderstanding were constant hurdles, ones that required strength and resilience to overcome. Roman knew that respect wasn't something that was simply given. It had to be earned through actions and integrity. He was proud of the way he had handled the situation at the bar, standing his ground with dignity and composure. It was a reminder of the strength he carried within him, a strength forged through experience and hardship. As he sat in the quiet of his home, Roman felt a renewed sense of resolve. The apology from Bryce, while not fixing everything, was a step in the right direction. It showed that even in the face of prejudice, change was possible. One person's acknowledgement of their mistakes could spark a broader understanding and respect. Roman knew the fight wasn't over, but neither was he. Strength wasn't just about winning fights but standing firm when it mattered. And that, more than anything, earned him the respect he never needed to ask for. How do you think Roman's experiences in the military influenced his reaction to the confrontation at the bar? Roman's resolve symbolizes the strength needed to face life's challenges.